Izzy Stradlin is the original rhythm guitarist from Guns N' Roses, a very important member of the band who wrote and co-wrote some of Guns N' Roses' most iconic songs. Now, fans filming concerts is very common today, but it wasn't back in the early 90s. During a Guns N' Roses concert on July the 2nd, 1991, in Maryland Heights, Missouri, which is a suburb of St. Louis, an incident took place. During a rendition of Rocket Queen, Axl Rose noticed that a fan was filming the show with a camera. After asking the venue security to take the camera away, Axl himself jumped into the audience and confronted the fan. Axl was subsequently pulled away from the audience by security. Once back on stage, Axl announced to the crowd that he's going home, slamming his mic on the ground and walking off stage, eventually joined by the rest of the band. The angered crowd proceeded to riot, leading to dozens of injuries and significant damage to the venue. Police were unable to arrest Axl Rose until nearly a year later, due to the fact that Guns N' Roses were touring overseas. Charges were filed against Axl Rose, but a judge ruled that Axl did not directly incite the riot. In his defense, Axl Rose stated that the Guns N' Roses security team had made 4 separate requests to the venue security staff to remove the camera, which apparently were ignored, and that other members of the band had reported being hit by bottles thrown at them from the audience, while the security staff refused to enforce a drinking limit. Now, this type of incident wasn't unique to the St. Louis concert, however, as a similar type of incident nearly unfolded on August 24th, 1991, at a Guns N' Roses concert in Mannheim, Germany. Guns N' Roses is infamous for being a band which had trouble following them wherever they went. The unnecessary drama that followed Guns N' Roses was not something Izzy Stradlin was willing to deal with any longer. On November 7th, 1991, Izzy Stradlin quit the band. Izzy himself cited a combination of Axl Rose's behavior, his apparent mismanagement of the band, and various difficulties being around Slash, Matt Sorum, and Duff McKagan, who at the time still had various addictions, while Izzy Stradlin himself was now sober. The combination of all these different reasons led to him eventually departing Guns N' Roses. In Izzy Stradlin's own words, quote, "Once I quit drugs, I couldn't help looking around and asking myself, is this all there is? I was just tired of it. I needed to get out." Guns N' Roses had to find a replacement for Izzy Stradlin within 3 weeks of his departure, or they would have had to have canceled several shows. Dave Navarro from Jane's Addiction was considered, but in the end, Gilby Clarke was chosen. Slash himself has credited Gilby Clarke for having saved the band. Interestingly, in 1993, Gilby Clarke broke his arm in a motorcycle accident and was replaced for several weeks by Izzy Stradlin. I got to do an interview with Gilby Clarke for my documentary, What is Classic Rock? If you'd like to see that documentary, the links are available in the description box below. During my interview with Gilby Clarke, we talk about a variety of different subjects. Everything I do is original, so if you like my work, make sure to subscribe for more. Now, here is my interview with Gilby Clarke.
All the greatest songwriters, musicians, performers didn't really give a shit what anybody thought about them. They did it for themselves. It's a very selfish act. I mean, that's the way I've always felt. It's like when I'm making music, I do it for myself. I make a record that I want to buy. I don't do it because I know what my fans want. You know, to me, that's chasing your tail. You know, that's the ultimate sellout, in my opinion. And I hear that so much by people, today's artists, what they call today's artists, which I really don't consider them artists. I just consider them product. It's just, so that's what I want to see. I want to see somebody that's just unique, some rock and roll that just doesn't give a shit, you know, that, you know, if they get famous, you know, from making some great music, then hey, that's the bonus, but they're really in it for themselves and to just, you know, they have this passion inside them. I just want to see that passion back.
What would you like to see changed?
What I'd like to see is I want to see more rock and roll. I really do. It's like everything is so nice and pretty and the package is so intricate. You know, what I love about rock and roll is that freedom aspect to it, that there are no rules. You know, it's like you don't really give a shit what other people think. To me, that's what's great about rock and roll. That's the decadent part of it. You know, that's the anarchist part of it. When I was in high school, and granted we're going back a long ways, and classic rock bands like Zeppelin and all these bands we've talked about, you know, were popular, and I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to play guitar and I wanted to be in a band. It was really easy for me to start a band. There were at least 4 or 5 drummers in my high school. There were 10 bass players. There were 20 guitar players, and there were 3 singers. When my daughter, who is now 21 and in college, when she was in high school and she wanted to start a band, she played guitar and she was really into the same music that I grew up with. There was 1 drummer in her high school. There was 1 bass player. There were about 5 to 10 guitar players and 600 singers. How I define classic rock is pretty much any music before 1980 is the way I've always thought of it. To me, classic rock is Led Zeppelin. Classic rock is Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, Aerosmith, Kiss. And I know that there's genres in between all those. Some are metal bands, some are just rock bands, but to me, that's what classic rock is. I think over time, classic rock has changed. In my opinion, Guns N' Roses is now classic rock. The bands from the 90s have now moved into it. So I honestly don't really know what the pinpoint definition is. But if you ask me who's classic rock, in my opinion, I could tell you who that is. For myself, when I was younger and I moved from Cleveland to Los Angeles and to really get in the band and to be into music and make my mark, it was actually a lot easier than you would think. First of all, I had a center to go to, which was Hollywood. Things were happening in Hollywood. There were a lot of great bands coming along. Great bands that were unsigned, that didn't have great bands. I mean, when some of us that were around during that time, we get together and we talk about that, it blows our minds how many bands were great that never made a record, that at that time weren't good enough, but in our minds, oh my God, this band was fantastic. We all had a common language. Music was a common language. It was really easy to talk to somebody when I was out in a club that had long black hair. Oh my God, do you like the New York Dolls? Yeah, I love the New York Dolls. And we immediately were friends. We had something in common. There's something that a lot of modern artists say that drives me insane. And that's that quote, "I do it for the fans." That just drives me insane. To me, that's just not an artist. An artist's job is to come up with something original, unique, and they do it for themselves because they have this passion and they have this gift. Nowadays, there's just so many genres and so many subgenres that, it's impossible. Do you like punk rock music? Well, yeah, I mean, that's, it's Green Day, it's it's the Clash. I mean, it's so many different genres within a genre. It's really hard to kind of pick people that you want to play with and work with.
Where is the line between metal and hard rock? How do you start to distinguish the two?
In my opinion, where the line is drawn between metal and classic rock really has to do with the guitar playing. I mean, as a guitar player, that is my opinion. And it really has to do kind of with the overdrive or the distortion in the guitar. It's like when you listen, to Bad Company, yeah, it's a Les Paul and a Marshall, but it's a different Les Paul and a Marshall than, Metallica. Metallica is just so much more overdriven, crazy pentatonic scales and things like that, and whammy bars and things like that. I can pinpoint the difference of the bands, who I think is metal and who I think is classic rock, and I guess trying to define the word or the description is actually difficult, but to me it's in the guitar playing. Is the guitar player a metal guitar player or is the guitar player a rock and roll guitar player? And I guess when we were talking earlier about blues based, that's absolutely the borderline. To me, all those bands, Zeppelin, Deep Purple, Sabbath, all were major blues influenced bands. But later on, once Eddie Van Halen came along, it really changed everything. Hendrix changed all those guys, but Eddie Van Halen changed all these guitar players. In my opinion, the decline of hard rock music is a lot of different factors. I do think it's the fact that hard rock music really isn't at the forefront anymore. It's not selling millions of records like it did in its heyday. Are record executives at fault? That's a little bit of it, but in my opinion, music, rock and roll, anything is really kind of new. We're really only 30, 40 years into it. From when Elvis really started rock and roll, and it was inevitable that it would get to this point where it gets a little stagnant. It's like there are only 12 notes, so there really is only so much you can do. I mean, now, there's, millions of guitar players all trying to think of that riff, but Smoke on the Water's already been done. Cashmere's already been done. It really is more than anything is there, getting a new, fresh idea, trying to get it out there. So it's a fault of a lot of people why rock, in my opinion, has declined a little bit. What I want to say about the current state of classic rock more than anything is I do have hope. I really do. I mean, I was around in the 80s when things were really bleak. There was a lot of generic music. There was a lot of boring, bad records out, and there was no rock radio stations. There were no rock concerts. There was nothing. And then bands like Guns N' Roses came along. I mean, even bands like Poison, and, there were bands that came into Los Angeles that really were good bands that made a difference, and they changed the whole thing. So I want to just say that I do have hope. There can be a new young band, with a whole new creative outlook that can really take this in a new direction and spark a new generation to do it. But just remember, back in those days, the bands that were great back then took a great singer, a great guitar player, a great bass player, and a great drummer, keyboard player, whatever. They took these unique, great parts to make one sum. Nowadays, most of the bands will have like a great guitar player or a great singer or like one person, and then, the other guys in the band are in 10 different bands. That's really what it's going to take. It's really going to take some, some commitment, some sacrifices to really get some new young band. But I do have hope. I honestly do have hope. I really do think that can change, because I saw it happen with my own eyes years and years ago. And I do think it's possible, because I do think people are still passionate about music. And I do think music is an important part of people's lives. And therefore, how can you let a genre like classic rock die?